Hello, and welcome to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. This is where we share stories for inspiration, entertainment, and encouragement because we all know emergency nurses have the best stories. Now, here's your host, Kevin McFarland.
My name is Kevin McFarland, and I am the host of this brand new podcast you're listening to called The Art of Emergency Nursing. I want to tell you a little bit about me and a little bit about the podcast and give you an idea of what to expect each week when you join. I'll start by telling you a little bit about me. I already told you my name is Kevin McFarland, and I have been working in the emergency department for over 20 years. I'm a certified emergency nurse, a certified trauma nurse, and I've been hooked on the ED ever since my first day. I've held positions from ER technician to director, with most of my time being a stretcher side nurse. I've been actively involved with the ENA throughout my career, and I've been lucky enough to serve not only at the chapter level, but have had the opportunity to serve on a couple national committees as well. I can't recommend enough getting involved with your professional organization. It opens up so many doors and so many opportunities. On a more personal level, I'm lucky enough to have an amazing wife who is my number one fan. We have 2 4-legged babies who you may hear occasionally on the podcast. One or the other is usually within arm's reach when I'm recording. And if the doorbell rings, forget it. They're going to go nuts. Now let me tell you a little bit about the podcast and what to expect. I've been an avid podcast listener for about 6 years. Occasionally I'd get ideas to start a podcast and the idea would come and go. Recently, I was at an emergency nursing conference and I was sitting with a group of nurses, and as they often do, the conversation quickly turned to work. The next couple hours were filled with your typical ED stories. Some were hilarious, some were tragic, some everyone at the table could relate to, and others none of us could believe. It was at that time I came up with the idea for the Art of Emergency Nursing. I decided that I wanted to record a podcast that would allow emergency nurses to tell the stories that shaped and sometimes scarred their careers. My goal is that this podcast will be a lesson for both new nurses and experienced nurses, and let them know that they're not alone in this journey. They can learn a lot from the others who have come before them, and my hope is that our stories will inspire, educate, and encourage the listener to get through their next 12-hour shift. So with all that, I welcome you to the Art of Emergency Nursing. And remember that while nursing is clearly a science, it's the art of what we do that touches the lives of our patients every day. This podcast is going to be about stories, and in that spirit, I want to share with you the story of my first day in the emergency department. I was a brand new EMT intermediate, and I was working as a tech in a local emergency department. On my very first day, I was standing in the nurses' station while the nurses took report. And I remember standing there basking in my glory of what a cool guy I was to have such a great job. I'm standing there at the nurses' station. I'm looking at the dry erase board with all our patients there for the day. And all of a sudden, this butt naked, about 90-year-old woman goes running down the hall. I was floored. I didn't know what to say. I turned around and looked at the charge nurse like, holy cow, did you see that? And he looked at me and he goes, what are you doing, man? Go get her. And I was like, wait, but she's naked. And he's like, I know. Take a blanket. Cover her up. We don't want naked people running down the hall. It was at that day I was like, oh my God, this job is going to change me. I had no idea how it would change me and that it would become my career for the next 20 years. But I'm really glad it did. Over the years, I've taken care of lots of patients, many that I'll never remember, plenty that I'll never forget. I always think about those moments, those small moments in the emergency nursing career that shape your practice and the way you take care of patients. My goal with this podcast is to tell those stories. I want to hear your stories. I want to hear your story of your first patient, your first death, your first med error. All those stories that, again, shape and scar our careers. I look forward to spending time with you every week and hope someday I'll get to hear your story. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe on your podcast player of choice. And don't forget to share this podcast with a friend.
Thanks for listening to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook.